Halvar, God of Battle. 2 generic mana, 2 white mana for a 4/4 legendary creature god. Creatures you control that are enchanted or equipped have double strike. And at the beginning of each combat, you may attach target aura or equipment attached to a creature you control to target creature you control. On the back is the Sword of the Realms, a 2 mana legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has vigilance. And whenever equipped creature dies, return it to its owner's hand, and you can equip it for 1 and a white. So Halvar is the god of battle and is the defender and bodyguard, the protector of the Skoti. He was discovered as an orphan in a giant eagle's nest on Axgard. So I assume he was born a dwarf. If he was on Axgard, I guess he could have been a human orphaned on Axgard, but I think he might be a dwarf.
He looks like a human.
Yeah, the dwarves do kind of have a bit more. They look like the dwarves on Kaladesh. Like I couldn't even distinguish them from a lot of humans, but a
dwarf definitely made a sword.
Look quite a bit different on Kaldheim, I feel. Yeah, the sword was made by a dwarf, and the sword of the Realms, was made for Halvar. He didn't get it right away. Dwarves. But yeah, it was made by the dwarven forge master Cole. And it was made for Halvar, yeah. But it was separated from him, and he didn't get it till the very end of the story. Which we can talk about a little bit, because the whole story's out now. So Halvar shows up at the end of the story. His the Sword of the Realms is stolen as soon as it's finished by Tybalt, disguised as Valky. The sword is used to, cause all the realms to collide and doomscars and monsters to cross over into other realms, and there's this big war that's about to start. They get the sword back from Tybalt, they get the sword to Halvar, and Halvar's able to keep the whole world from exploding by closing the rifts with the sword. And then that's kind of how the story ends. Without going into too many extra spoiler details. Yeah, sorry. You can go.
So the sword was being made for Halvar, but it got stolen.
Yeah, by Tybalt.
Before he got it. Okay. I see.
Yeah, and that act is shown on
the Trickster
God's Heist. One thing that Tybalt remarks in the story is that every plane has a god of battle. Every plane that he's visited, he feels like has a god of battle, and that's just a really common thing, I guess, because all realms have war or fighting of some kind.
Yeah, that's kind of funny that he points it out as a trope.
Yeah, right.
kind of breaking the fourth wall.
So I'm guessing the Norse had a god of battle too, right?
I don't think there's a single one. I mean, it's kind of a Thor is a god of battle, Odin's a god of war. I don't think they distinguish. All the gods are capable of war. What he first strikes me as is so there's an Odin comparison and there's a Thor comparison. The one most important god that isn't represented yet is Tyr, which is Tuesday, right? Tyr's Day. So we've got Tyr's Day, Odin's Day, Thor's Day, Freya's Day, right? But Tyr isn't represented yet in here. And as much as he's a god of war, which he is, he's a bit more of a god of justice as well, which is not represented in Halvar, that at least I know. Right. But if you want a god that is equipment oriented, god of war that is armed with a sword makes good sense. There's not another god that's a sword is not a usual Viking weapon. They're much bigger with axes and hammers. But I mean, they had swords, I'm sure. But typically, there's no sword is not representative of any particular god, except that it makes sense to be a god of war, a god of and to some extent, a sword can be a symbol of justice, right? It's the king's power to dispense justice is often represented by a sword, I think.
The Sword of the Realms grants +2/+0 and vigilance, which sure. But
That's
then
a
when
nice
the
white-
equipped creature dies, it returns it to its owner's hand, which I don't exactly know how that connects to the Sword of the Realms. The sword itself has the powers to open up omen paths and cross between all the realms of Kaldheim freely, and then you can also create doom scars with the Sword of the Realms if you use it enough and leave all these omen paths open and create paths through everything, whatever. And that's what Tybalt's using it for. But I'm not exactly sure what the connection of it returning the creature to your hand so you can recast it is.
Well, I know that in general, in Magic, if you have an equipment and the creature dies, it either goes to the discard or it's still on the battlefield, I suppose. But it's never stolen.
The equipment or the creature?
The equipment. So in real life, if you defeat someone in battle, you could steal their sword, and that doesn't happen exactly in Magic. You kill whatever creature was equipped with a sword. You don't get to keep the sword. And this is just
it stays on your side of the battlefield.
And this just makes it even truer that it goes to the owner's hand, so it's not left on the battlefield. The sword stays in
play. It's the creature that dies goes to your hand, which almost seems like it's supposed to like reincarnate it, which doesn't really happen in the story. That's what I'm trying to figure out, the connection between a sword that can somehow bring its owner back to life. Is sort of what it's suggesting.
It's certainly really suggesting that they're not going. They're not going to hell. They're not going to the afterlife. They're kind of in a limbo that they're not being picked up by the Valkyries and taken away from battle. They have a chance of returning to battle, right? I think
it seemed almost more like it was Valkyrie flavored with returning to the battlefield and fighting again instead of, I don't know exactly what I expected the Sword of the Realms to do in game. I almost expected to like blink a creature or like exile them and return them to play kind of thing, as like they're traveling, otherworld journey kind of style. But it returns it to your hand, which I guess does let it go to a different place, like cutting through the cosmos and returning to your hand. I guess kind of works, but it also is a way to not regenerate a guy, but to resurrect a guy. So it fits.
So the Sword of the Realms is a really, really good card.
It seems like quite a bomb, but luckily it's a mythic. I guess it's not going to show up too often in drafts.
Right. But when it does, you said whatever about the vigilance. I think the vigilance and the second line of text work really well together.
Absolutely. I didn't want to dismiss vigilance. I was just dismissing vigilance as something that's easy to show that a sword gives you. Like how does holding a sword now make you vigilant, right? Unless it I was just kind of dismissing an idea that a sword could sort of represent that. But obviously vigilance, being able to just freely attack into something, and if you die you go back to your hand, or if you don't you still stay untapped and can chump block and then return your hand and recast and re-equip it. Since the sword always stays in play and the creature always returns to your hand, like you can have one creature that's always immortal basically, which seems really bomb worthy.
What do you do? Do you just take the damage? Do you block and your creature dies and they get their creature back? Do you try to attack into it? Like there's typically no good options. And Halvar himself is a lot better than I expected. There's all sorts of like cheap auras and equipment, and giving those creatures double strike, when they're already being beefed up, is pretty huge. And also the mana discount of being able to freely move those to the right creature during combat. Very, very huge.
I think that's good too. If you end up casting something bigger on a later turn and you want to move something to it, you can always keep your equipment and enchantments on the best thing you've recently played, instead of like devoting an aura to a small guy. You can always move it up as you keep playing bigger and bigger stuff too.
Yeah, and that's true, because you can't normally, you wouldn't be able to move an aura even, where equipment you just need the mana investment. So the fact that it moves an aura is a very unique effect. We have we haven't seen it until now, and well, I'm sure there have been some cards that have it.
There's actually
it's not a very common
one of the
effect.
the partner commanders from the new Commander Legends did it. One of the white ones. Except
really?
I believe he could move an aura to one of your opponent's creatures too. So if you had a pacifism effects, you can move them around. But Halvar doesn't let you move things that aren't attached to your own creatures. Yeah. Well, it lets you move them, but you can only move them to your other creatures. You don't really want to move a pacifism or arrest to one of your own guys.
He's very much just moving equipment around, the weapons around, and I think that's very representative of his card, because it strongly exemplifies a leader who's able to,
strategist too.
Play out as the general role, and make sure everybody has the right equipment at the right time.
Yeah, and in his artwork, he has I'm pretty sure the armor on his table is his that he's going to put on, but he kind of looks like he's ready to share it too and throw this helmet to that person. And his sword
that's
to
the
else.
feel I get, and actually they're all helmets.
Are they?
So I think that is exactly what it is.
Okay.
I think so.
His showcase version, he's all armored up and is wearing a helmet, and in this case, you can see his face and you can see part of his chest. So I assumed he was putting his armor on in this artwork, but.
Gotcha.
I mean, it's ready to be shared anyway.
In an armory too. Yeah.
So he actually plays a role at the end of the story. He gets to he's the one who's there's a ticking time clock before everything is gonna crash together, and other people have to buy time for him to seal all the rifts, and that's the big climactic moment, is trying to keep the demons from murdering people. Well, whatever. It's a pretty cool climax.
Any of the chaos monsters himself.
I believe you mean in the ending?
Yeah.
The ending is demons and zombies attacking, while the humans and elves are defending defending Halvar as he's closing stuff. Something like that.
I was just trying to look at other possibilities of if it was Tyr, to be a bit more with engaging the chaos monsters, because Tyr is well known for taking care of the Fenris wolf. But
okay.
And I'm just trying to think of another god that might, besides Tyr, because he isn't a good match, or not a great match. So maybe there was somebody else, but there isn't a single god of battle. I don't think. I think each soldier or each warrior would have chosen their preference, and all of them gave support during battle. So nothing came to mind. And as you pointed out, a lot of equipment stuff mythologically is the realm of dwarves. The dwarves not only crafted wonderful items, they also often had disadvantages in the long run. I don't know what you call it. Not curses, but there were two-edged swords. So as much as they provide a bonus,
a monkey's paw effect.
Well, not to that extent, but they're not free from potential problems, because any sword is sharp, and it's easy enough to cut yourself on your own tool. That was much more the lesson, that the gifts are dangerous. They're not totally blessings, at least the ones that come from the dwarves. And the most prime example is the story of Siegfried in the Ring. That's the opera by Wagner. He was a dwarf that crafted wonderful items, including a ring that then inspired him. That granted great power, but it also made him super greedy, and so it turned his darkness, it strengthened the darkness that was already within him, and it turned him eventually into a dragon that hoarded over his gold pile, just like all dragons do. And the good guy had to go and kill the dragon. And
is dwarven magic that caused that?
That's the kind of thing that he was a dwarf, and he was the craftsman with the magic that created the ring, that created the swords, that crafted things, just like Peter Dinklage in the Thor movie. He crafts, a Stormbringer for Thor, but it's obviously had its own potential. It needed help to craft, and I'm just trying to think of other examples of how it's a kind of common trope of the dwarves creating, being craftsmen, right? That's a D&D kind of thing, right?
I've heard that before, but I didn't know anything about the almost cursed nature of some of their items.
Well, you've heard of the gifts. Gifts have their own liabilities,
sure,
in a sense, right? That it's much more that, because I don't think it's quite laid out in the, like you said, Monkey's Paw. It's not quite that explicit. So, but Sword of the Realms is a wonderful weapon, but it's not necessarily.
It's used by evil, like, for almost its entire lifetime until the very end of the story.
So there you go. But it's not evil in itself. It's just it's as powerful as it is in the hands of the hero. It's also powerful in the hands of the bad guys.